The church bells tolled mournfully across the grey skies of Yorkshire. The air was heavy with drizzle, and black umbrellas clustered together at the entrance of St. Mary's Parish. Inside the chapel, rows of mourners sat in a silence so deep that the sound of each cough, each shuffle of shoes against the wooden floor, seemed magnified. Amelia stood near the small white coffin at the front. Her hands trembled as she held a handkerchief, her eyes fixed on the brass nameplate. Oliver James Whitmore. Beloved son. 2017 to 2025. The words burned into her vision like fire etched into glass. She remembered the way Oliver had laughed only weeks ago, his small hands clutching a telescope as he pointed at the stars outside their window. He had been only 8, and he had believed that space held secrets he might one day touch. Her brother-in-law, Reverend Lawrence, stepped up to the lectern. His clerical collar was neat, his Bible clutched tightly. At first, Amelia thought he would speak words of comfort, words that might soothe her shattered soul. But the moment his voice rose, the air shifted. This child's death, Lawrence declared, his tone strong and unwavering, is the will of God. For when sin stains a bloodline, heaven seeks to end it. Gasps echoed across the chapel. Amelia froze, her chest constricting as though invisible hands were gripping her throat. She wanted to scream, but her voice died in her mouth. Around her, neighbors whispered. Some shook their heads. Others bowed in shame or confusion. The words fell like stones into a lake, spreading ripples of unease. Lawrence continued, his eyes fixed on Amelia. The wages of sin are never light. A broken marriage brings divine judgment. And this, he gestured to the coffin, is proof. Amelia's knees nearly gave way. She gripped the pew beside her to remain upright, her body trembling with fury and disbelief. Her son lay in a coffin, and yet Lawrence dared to brand his death as punishment. Tears blurred her vision, but through the haze she noticed something, small, but striking. Declan, Oliver's best friend, sat in the third pew. His face was pale, his lips quivering, as though he carried a truth too heavy for his young age. His eyes darted from the coffin to Lawrence, then back again. And for a brief second, Amelia felt a jolt of something darker than grief, an unease that whispered, Lawrence knows more than he admits. After the service, the mourners filed slowly out of St. Mary's. The rain had grown heavier, tapping against the stained glass windows like 1,000 impatient fingers. Amelia remained near the coffin, her heart raw and hollow, when she noticed Declan lingering at the edge of the aisle. His small fists were clenched, his eyes darting nervously as if weighing the danger of speaking. At last, he shuffled closer, his shoes squeaking against the floor. Mrs. Whitmore, he whispered, barely audible above the patter of rain. It was not God. It was him. Amelia bent down, startled. What do you mean, Declan? Declan's lips trembled. He glanced over his shoulder, and for a moment Amelia feared he might flee. But then the words tumbled out of him, rushed and terrified. Reverend Lawrence, he made Oliver drink something. A juice. He said it would make him strong for church. Oliver did not want it, but he made him. He said if Oliver refused, God would be angry. Amelia froze. Her skin prickled, her stomach knotted. The words stabbed into her like shards of ice. She gripped Declan's shoulders, her breath shallow. Are you certain? She whispered. Declan nodded fiercely, his eyes filling with tears. He told me not to tell anyone. But I saw it. I saw him pour it from a bottle he hid in his coat. Before Amelia could reply, the heavy tread of boots echoed behind them. Lawrence himself emerged from the vestry, his expression severe, his eyes narrowing as they fell upon Declan. Run along, boy, Lawrence said, his voice cold but calm. Your mother will be waiting. Declan stiffened, shrinking beneath his gaze. Amelia stood between them instinctively, shielding the child, though her own body trembled. Lawrence's stare lingered a second too long before he turned away, his robes sweeping across the stone floor. The chapel door closed with a hollow thud. Declan clutched Amelia's sleeve. His whisper was urgent now, desperate. "He will hurt me if he knows I told. Please, do not let him." Amelia pulled him close, her mind spinning with terror and fury. Something far darker than grief was unfolding before her, and the first fragile thread of truth had just been pulled loose. The night descended over the Yorkshire town, cloaking the cobbled streets in mist. Amelia sat in her modest sitting room, the fire burning low in the hearth. Declan had fallen asleep on the sofa, his small frame curled beneath a blanket. His whispered confession replayed in her mind again and again, each word striking like a bell in the dark. She stared into the flames, gripping Oliver's telescope that still rested by the window. It was the last thing he had touched before the illness took him. The thought of Lawrence's hand forcing poison upon her son made her stomach twist until bile rose in her throat. A knock at the door shattered the silence. Her heart raced. Slowly, she stood, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. She opened the door to find Lawrence standing on her doorstep, his figure framed by the yellow glow of the street lamp. Rain dripped from his hat, his eyes sharp as a blade. "Amelia," he said, voice measured, almost gentle. "You should not let grief consume you. The boy is gone. Accept it as divine will." She swallowed hard, her grip tightening on the doorframe. "Do not come here again," she hissed, her voice trembling. Lawrence's gaze flickered past her shoulder. His eyes lingered on Declan asleep in the parlor. His lips curved into something too cold to be called a smile. "Children have such wild imaginations," he murmured. "It would be a pity if a foolish tale caused more pain than healing." Amelia slammed the door before he could say another word, the echo rattling the panes of glass. Her chest heaved, fear mixing with fury. She locked the door, her hands shaking, her mind certain that Lawrence's visit was not a warning but a threat. She turned back towards the sofa. Declan stirred in his sleep, murmuring Oliver's name. His small hand clutched the blanket tighter, as if warding off a nightmare. The house creaked under the weight of the storm outside, but Amelia knew the true storm was yet to come. And it would not strike from the heavens, but from a man of flesh and blood who wore the mask of God. Morning broke with a pale and colorless light. The storm had passed, leaving the streets glistening with puddles that mirrored the gray sky. Amelia had barely slept, her mind restless with fear and suspicion. Declan sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea that he barely touched. He looked fragile, far too young to carry such a heavy truth. Amelia forced herself to smile, though her heart ached. "You are safe here," she told him softly. "No one will harm you." Declan's gaze flickered uncertainly before he reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small object wrapped in a handkerchief, setting it on the table between them. "I kept this," he whispered. Amelia unfolded the cloth with trembling hands. Inside lay a tiny glass vial, its neck still damp with a sticky residue. The faint smell of something sharp and bitter filled the air, stinging her nose. Her stomach turned. "Where did you get this?" "From Oliver's room," Declan said. His voice cracked. "The night he died, Reverend Lawrence gave him juice. I saw him pour it into a glass from this bottle. Oliver said it tasted strange. He did not want to finish it, but Lawrence made him." Amelia stared at the vial, her pulse hammering in her ears. The truth was no longer a whisper but something tangible, something she could hold. Yet the weight of it terrified her. Before she could speak, a sharp rap came at the front door. Declan jumped, nearly spilling his tea. Amelia quickly tucked the vial back into the cloth and hid it in her apron pocket. Through the window, she saw two figures. A pair of policemen in dark uniforms stood waiting, their caps glistening with raindrops. Her breath caught. Why were they here? She opened the door, and one of the officers tipped his cap politely. "Mrs. Whitmore." We need to ask you a few questions regarding your son's passing. Some concerns have been raised. Amelia felt her legs weaken. Her eyes darted to Declan, who sat frozen at the table, staring at her with wide, fearful eyes. The truth was knocking at her door, but so too was the danger. The two policemen stepped into the parlor, their boots leaving damp marks on the wooden floor. Amelia guided them inside with a stiff smile, though her heart pounded wildly. Declan sat silent at the kitchen table, his small fingers clutching the edge of his chair. "Mrs. Whitmore," the elder officer began, his tone steady, "we have received information that your son's death may not have been from natural causes. The doctor who examined him noted irregularities in his blood. We are here to ask if you observed anything unusual." Amelia's throat tightened. She thought of the vial hidden in her apron, the bitter smell that clung to her hands. She forced her voice steady. "He fell ill so suddenly. Within 2 days, he was gone. That is all I know." The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. "Did anyone give him food or drink in those final days?" Before Amelia could respond, Declan's voice trembled across the room. "Yes. Reverend Lawrence did." The policeman turned. Declan's face was pale but resolute. "He gave Oliver a drink. I saw it. He said it was a vitamin. But Oliver felt worse after." The room seemed to shrink. Amelia's breath caught as the officers leaned forward, their expressions sharp with attention. "Declan," the younger officer said gently, "are you certain?" Declan nodded, his lips quivering but his gaze unwavering. "I swear it. He made him drink it. And he told me not to tell." Amelia's hands shook as she finally reached into her apron. She placed the folded cloth upon the table and unwrapped it, revealing the small glass vial. The faint bitter odor rose once more, making the policemen exchange grave looks. "This," Amelia whispered, "was found in Oliver's room." Declan saw him pour from it. The elder officer carefully lifted the vial with a handkerchief, his jaw tightening. "We shall have this examined at once." Outside, church bells told the midday hour, their solemn notes drifting into the house. Amelia looked at Declan, who sat trembling, his courage laid bare. For the first time since Oliver's death, a fragile spark of hope stirred within her. Yet with it came dread, for she knew Lawrence would not remain still once the net began to close around him. By late afternoon the house had grown still again. The policemen had left, taking the vial with them, their heavy words lingering in the air like smoke. Amelia stood at the window, staring down the lane. Every passing shadow made her heart jolt, for she knew Lawrence would sense the walls closing in. Declan sat by the fire, tracing circles in the ash with a poker, his face pale with exhaustion. "Will they arrest him?" he asked timidly. Amelia knelt beside him, brushing his hair back. "They will seek the truth," she said, though she could not bring herself to promise more. A sharp creak outside snapped her head towards the door. The sound of gravel shifting, the unmistakable weight of boots. She pulled back the curtain and her breath caught. Across the lane, half hidden by the hedge, Lawrence stood watching the house. His black coat clung to his tall frame, the brim of his hat shadowing his face. Even at that distance, Amelia felt the weight of his stare. He raised one gloved hand in a slow, deliberate gesture. Not a wave, but a warning. Declan noticed her stiffen and scrambled to the window. When he saw the figure outside, he gasped and gripped Amelia's arm. "He knows," the boy whispered. "He knows we told." Amelia pulled the curtain shut with shaking hands. Her mind reeled. Lawrence was not hiding. He was announcing himself, daring her to act. As night fell, she checked every lock twice, then 3 times. Still, she could not silence the pounding in her chest. Declan lay curled beneath blankets upstairs, whimpering in his dreams. But Amelia could not sleep. She sat by the window in the dark, clutching Oliver's telescope like a weapon, staring into the night. Beyond the hedge, she swore she saw a flicker of movement. Lawrence had not gone. He was waiting. The clock struck midnight. Each chime echoed through the house, unsettling in the silence. Amelia sat rigid in her chair by the window, the telescope heavy in her lap. Her eyes burned from staring into the dark, but she dared not look away. Upstairs, Declan's soft breathing was the only sign of peace. Then it came, a faint scrape at the back door. The sound was deliberate, metal brushing against metal. Amelia froze, every nerve sparking with dread. Slowly, she rose to her feet and crept through the hallway, her bare feet silent on the boards. The kitchen lay in darkness, the window panes glistening with the last traces of rain. She pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering. The scraping grew louder, then stopped. A shadow moved across the glass. Amelia clutched the telescope in both hands, her breath caught in her throat. The handle of the door rattled once, twice, and then fell still. For a moment, the silence was worse than the noise. She strained to hear, and then came the faintest whisper through the crack of the door, low, taunting, unmistakable. "You cannot hide, Amelia." Her blood ran cold. The whisper drifted away, replaced by retreating footsteps crunching over gravel. She dashed to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to glimpse the lane. Lawrence's tall figure melted into the mist, his black coat billowing like wings. Amelia sank against the wall, shaking violently. He had not broken in. Not yet. He wanted her to know he could. She hurried upstairs to check on Declan. He stirred as she tucked the blanket around him, murmuring Oliver's name in his sleep. Amelia sat at his bedside, listening to the storm of her heartbeat. She knew now with brutal certainty, this was no longer about suspicion or whispers. It was a battle, and Lawrence had just declared it. Dawn crept into the house with a thin grey light. Amelia had not slept at all. Her body ached with fatigue, yet her mind burned with a restless fire. Lawrence's whisper still echoed in her skull, a promise that he would not stop. Declan stirred awake, rubbing his eyes. "Is he gone?" he asked, his voice small. "For now," Amelia answered, though she did not dare to sound certain. As Declan dressed, Amelia moved to Oliver's old room. She had avoided it since the funeral, unable to bear the sight of his little books and scattered drawings. But something gnawed at her now, an instinct that told her Oliver's room still held answers. The air smelled faintly of dust and childhood. She sank onto his bed, stroking the quilt he had loved. Then her hand brushed against something hard beneath the mattress. Her breath caught. She lifted the edge of the quilt and pulled out a leather-bound book, its cover cracked with age. It was a journal. Flipping through, Amelia froze. The handwriting was not Oliver's. These pages were filled with neat, severe script, Reverend Lawrence's hand. She read aloud under her breath. "The boy is weak. His bloodline is stained. To end it is an offering. A cleansing. Soon the mother will break, and the curse will be lifted." Amelia's stomach churned. Page after page, the words grew darker, speaking of sacrifice, of purity, of debts to be cleared. Notes of dates, amounts of money owed, and strange symbols filled the margins. Declan appeared at the doorway, his face pale. "What is it?" Amelia clutched the journal to her chest. "Proof," she whispered. "Enough to show the world who he truly is." But even as she said it, a shiver ran down her spine. If Lawrence had hidden this here, it meant he had already been inside the house, close enough to touch them, close enough to place his madness where Oliver once slept. And if he realized what she had found, he would come back for it. The day passed in uneasy silence. Amelia kept the journal hidden beneath her apron, every page searing her thoughts. She had written down the most damning passages on a separate scrap of paper, fearing that if the journal was ever stolen, the truth would not vanish with it. Declan stayed close to her side. He would not stray from the kitchen, not even to fetch coal from the shed. Every sound of the wind against the windows made him flinch. As dusk fell, the lane outside grew cloaked in mist. The air was heavy, carrying the smell of damp earth and wood smoke. Amelia had just set bread upon the table when a knock rattled the front door. Her heart seized. It was not the polite tap of a neighbor, nor the heavy thump of a tradesman. It was slow. Deliberate. 3 knocks, and then silence. Declan's eyes widened. "Don't open it," he whispered. Amelia crept to the door, her hand hovering over the latch. Through the thin wood, a voice spoke, calm, measured, with the velvet weight of command. "Amelia. We need to talk." It was Lawrence. She pressed her back against the wall, her breath quick and shallow. Declan clutched her sleeve, trembling. The voice came again, lower this time. "You have something of mine. Return it, and this will end quietly. No more pain for you. No more fear for the boy." Amelia's grip tightened on the journal hidden at her waist. Every instinct screamed to stay silent, yet she knew he would not leave easily. The silence stretched. Then came the soft scrape of metal against the keyhole. He was trying to force his way in. Declan gasped, and Amelia pulled him close, her mind racing. The police were miles away, and the neighbors would not hear through the thick mist. She had only seconds to decide: confront him, flee upstairs, or find some way to stall him. The door shuddered under his hand. And then, abruptly, the knocking stopped. The house trembled in stillness after the last knock. Amelia pressed her hand to Declan's back, guiding him towards the stairs. "Upstairs," she whispered, quietly now. But Declan clung to her arm. "He won't stop. He'll come back. We have to do something." Before Amelia could answer, the sound of heavy boots shifted outside. Lawrence was circling the house. The scrape of his hand along the wall, the crunch of gravel beneath his steps, he was searching for another way in. Amelia's heart thundered. She reached beneath her apron, pulled out the leather-bound journal, and stared at it. This was the weapon, sharper than any blade. Proof enough to destroy him. Her thoughts raced. She could not confront him alone. She needed witnesses. She needed the law. She grasped Declan's hand, and with sudden courage, flung the front window wide. The cold night air rushed in, carrying her voice as she shouted into the misty lane. "Help! Reverend Lawrence is here." The silence shattered. Dogs barked in the distance, lights flickered in nearby cottages. Lawrence froze, caught mid-step. For the first time, his mask of holy authority slipped, his face twisted with rage. "You foolish woman," he hissed, stepping from the shadows. "You think they will believe you over me? I am their shepherd. You are nothing but a fallen sinner." Amelia raised the journal high. "Then let them read your words. Every page, every plan. It ends tonight." At that moment, 2 lanterns bobbed through the mist. The policeman from the village, alerted by her cry, came striding up the lane. Lawrence faltered, his eyes darting between Amelia, the journal, and the approaching lights. Declan found his voice, trembling but fierce. "He killed Oliver. He made him drink it. I saw." The words rang out clear, and in them was truth no mist could hide. Lawrence lunged forward, but the policemen were faster. Rough hands seized him, dragging him back as he cursed and writhed. The journal was taken from Amelia's trembling grasp, its damning words placed in lawful hands. The mist carried his voice away, but his threats lingered. Yet Amelia stood tall, her arm around Declan, her tears fierce with relief. Oliver's name would not be buried beneath lies. His death would not be called a curse. It was murder, and it would be answered. As dawn broke once more over Yorkshire, Amelia held Declan close. For the first time in weeks, she breathed without fear. The church bells rang in the distance, not tolling for sorrow, but for justice. And in her heart, she whispered a promise to her lost son. They will never silence your truth again.